I want you to tap into a feeling that I think almost all of us have experienced at least once.
Oh, I know exactly where you're going with this.
Right. You are on your couch, you've carved out the entire evening. Maybe you've got like a specific snack ready to go.
You've got the lighting just right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are sitting down to watch a highly anticipated, big-budget live-action remake of an animated story.
A story that you have just fundamentally adored since you were a kid.
Yeah, something that's baked into your DNA. So you hit play, and visually, I mean, it's all there.
Right, the aesthetics are on point.
The wardrobe department totally nailed the silhouettes. The real-world locations look incredibly expensive, and, the casting seems totally fine on paper.
Sure.
But then maybe 10, maybe 15 minutes in, you get this creeping sensation.
Yeah.
Something is just off.
It is a very specific, almost physiological reaction. It's this subtle dissonance because you can't necessarily point to a single broken prop or like a wrong camera angle, but the entire frequency of the world feels fundamentally shifted.
That is the perfect way to describe it. The soul of the thing is vibrating at the wrong frequency.
Exactly.
Everything technically looks right, but the internal rhythm is just wrong. And, well, that brings us to the mission of our deep dive today.
We are going in deep on this one.
We really are. We are putting the actual mechanical anatomy of adaptation straight under the microscope.
And we should set some ground rules with you right now.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We are not doing this to join the endless internet outrage cycle.
No, absolutely not.
And we aren't here to just bash a piece of media either.
Right. We are doing a surgical exploration of why translations from the medium of animation to the medium of live action so frequently fracture.
Because the friction we're about to pull apart today, it isn't really about a studio's budget constraints.
Or like a specific actor's performance, right?
Right. Those are surface level complaints. What we are really dealing with is a profound structural clash of mediums.
A clash of mediums. I love that phrasing.
Today, we're going to look at how changing the visual delivery system of a story completely alters the psychological makeup of its characters.
It changes who they are.
It does. And we're going to look at how it breaks the actual epistemology of how the world's magic functions. And ultimately, we're going to examine that incredibly fragile trust that exists between a storyteller and their audience and, well, what happens when it shatters.
To do that, we have a really fascinating stack of source to work with.
A very unique stack.
Yeah, it's a dual-layered collection. So on the primary layer, we have raw production script excerpts from the recent live-action adaptation of Avatar, The Last Airbender.
Specifically zeroing in on the narrative arcs from Season 2.
Right. But we are pairing those blueprints with something incredible.
This is the best part.
It really is. We have a massive compilation of fiercely passionate, hyper-observant fan critique that have been freshly translated from Hebrew.
And I just have to say, the quality of this secondary source material is staggering.
It's blowing my mind, honestly.
Right, because these translated Hebrew critiques, they are operating on an entirely different level of media literacy.
They really are. They aren't just logging onto a forum and saying, I didn't like this scene.
No, they are forensically tracking micro-expressions.
Yes.
They're tracking shifts in character motivation and the underlying philosophical compromises the script make.
The frustration in these texts is just palpable because they are reacting to a shift in the very DNA of the story.
Exactly. They see the structural crack.
So let's jump right into the deep end then, because before we can even touch the giant CGI monsters or the massive martial arts set pieces, we have to talk about the absolute bedrock of television.
And dialogue.
The dialogue. We are looking at a brutal transition here. We are moving from the highly visual, metaphorical language of animation to the literal, exposition-heavy demands of live-action television.
And these fan critics are diagnosing the result as a terminal case of tell, don't show.
Tell, don't show. That is the glaring thread running through nearly every single critique we compiled.
It is. The friction is located in the literal syllables on the page.
Let's look at an example.
Yeah, take a foundational scene for the mythology of this universe. Aang is trapped in a gray metal room with King Bumi.
Right, and Aang is desperate. He absolutely needs Bumi to instruct him in earthbending.
But Bumi stonewalls him.
Completely shuts him down.
Instead of a kinetic lesson, Bumi opts to deliver this massive, incredibly dense theoretical lecture on the concept of Jing.
Oh man, he goes on this massive tangent about how there are like 85 distinct variations of Jing.
And he insists that before Aang can even attempt to move a single pedal, he has to master neutral Jing.
Which Bumi defines as the agonizing art of waiting.
Doing absolutely nothing.
Right, just standing there and listening to the earth.
And the overwhelming consensus in our fan sources is that this live-action scene is brutally long.
And punishingly dry.
They blast it as a massive wall of boring exposition that just kills the momentum of the episode.
Okay, wait. I have to actively push back on this critique for a second.
Oh.
Because I was reading this and thinking, isn't that exactly how martial arts are taught in reality?
How do you mean?
Well, if a master is trying to impart an abstract, invisible, philosophical concept, like the kinetic power of doing which we know draws heavy inspiration from real-world disciplines like Tai Chi or Bagua.
Right, the internal martial arts.
Yeah. Wouldn't a long, winding, frustrating conversation be the most realistic way to show that?
I see what you're saying.
Because you can't really do a backflip to demonstrate doing nothing, you know? Shouldn't we applaud the show for being realistic?
It is a really compelling point,
Yeah.
but it actually cuts straight to the heart of why this medium clash happens in the first place.
Okay, break that down for me.
The philosophy of Jing itself isn't the issue here. The writers clearly understand the lore.
Right, the words are accurate to the universe.
Yes. The problem is the visual execution of that philosophy.
Ah.
In the original animation, a dense theoretical lecture like this would never just be two people standing perfectly still.
Because animation doesn't have to be realistic.
Exactly. Animation has a unique visual toolbox. It can make abstract concepts literal.
How so?
The animators can cut to stylized metaphorical visuals in the background, or they can hyper-exaggerate Bumi's physical facial expression, stretching and squashing his features to carry the emotional weight of those dense words.
So the medium itself is doing the heavy lifting to keep you entertained.
Precisely. Animation inherently shows the abstract, whereas a camera just records reality.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that. A camera just records exactly what's in front of it.
Yes. Live-action television traps two human actors physically standing still inside a gray metal room, trading massive paragraphs of abstract theory.
Which feels like a homework.
It does. Without dynamic blocking, without the ability to physically distort reality for comedic or dramatic effect, a dynamic martial arts lesson devolves into a stale classroom lecture.
The kinetic momentum just grinds to a halt because the camera has nothing interesting to look at.
Exactly.
And what's wild is that it isn't just the ancient mystical philosophy that suffers from this. It's the normal human interactions.
Oh, the teenage.
The teenagers. The critics were relentlessly highlighting the absolute death of subtext in the romantic dialogue.
It is rough.
There is this scene between Sokka and Suki that was just getting skewered in the forums.
It really was.
Suki literally looks at Sokka and says, out loud, and I quote, "I was thinking while we're together, why not be together?"
The reviewers called their on-screen chemistry two wooden boards.
That is a devastatingly colorful.
It's brutal, but it's accurate, and it points to a very real panic that happens in modern television production.
What kind of panic?
The panic of compressed runtime.
Ah, right, because I was trying to articulate why that specific line of dialogue made my skin crawl, and it finally hit me.
What did you come up with?
It feels like you're sitting across from someone on a first date, right?
Okay.
And instead of actually flirting with you or using body language or letting there be a little bit of like nervous, messy silence.
Right, the normal human stuff.
Yeah. Instead of that, they just pull out their phone and read their dating app profile out loud to you across the table.
Wow.
Like, hello, I am now expressing romantic vulnerability regarding our current proximity.
That is hilarious.
It completely bypasses the messy, unspoken electricity of actual human connection.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanical failure of the scene. Because human beings rarely say exactly what they are feeling.
Never. We speak in circles.
We deflect, we use subtext, we joke. But when a television production lacks the screen time, when the showrunners know they only have 8 episodes instead of 20 to get these two characters to fall in love,
They hit the panic button.
they panic. They don't have the literal minutes to let a relationship idle and breathe through unspoken tension.
Because they have to get to the next CGI battle.
Right. So they force the characters to loudly, literally state their internal feelings. It completely eradicates the subtext and makes the human connection feel entirely artificial.
And that exact same screenwriting panic leads to what I kept calling the roller coaster manual problem in my notes.
The roller coaster manual. I like that.
Yeah, we have Longfeng. Now, assuming you know the lore, you know Longfeng is this terrifying shadowy operator in the Earth Kingdom.
They're very menacing.
Right, and at a critical juncture in the story, he just stands in a room and delivers this gargantuan exposition dump to the heroes.
He outlines step by step exactly how Azula executed a citywide coup.
It's just a massive wall of text detailing purely logistical plot mechanics.
It is.
It's like you're at a theme park. You are strapping into the front car of this massive, terrifying roller coaster.
Right, the tension is building.
You pull the safety harness down over your shoulders. Your adrenaline is spiking. You are staring over the edge of a 200-foot drop.
You ready to go?
And instead of launching the ride, a mechanic in a jumpsuit walks out with the clipboard and reads you a 40-page instruction manual on how pneumatic brakes operate.
It is the ultimate pacing killer.
It ruins the ride.
It does. And what's fascinating is how that analogy highlights the audience's psychological state. Nobody wants the engineering manual when they're strapped into the ride.
Exactly. We want the drop.
When an audience is primed for kinetic momentum and dramatic payoff, handing them technical documentation about how the plot happened off screen is a fatal error.
So if the writers are struggling this much to externalize internal thoughts and logistics through dialogue, how on earth are they handled?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because bending isn't just shooting lasers, right? It is essentially externalized psychology.
It is. And this transitions us perfectly into the somatic psychology of this world.
Somatic psychology. Let's dig into that.
The architecture of the magic system in this universe is arguably its greatest achievement because it is inherently biologically tied to the human nervous system.
The body and the magic are one.
Yeah, and the live-action adaptation either brilliantly captures this somatic connection or tragically drops it entirely.
Let's unpack the biology of bending, specifically looking at Aang's struggle with earthbending.
Okay.
The script excerpts are very explicit about how deeply his physical magic is tied. Aang is an air nomad.
Right.
The entire philosophy of air is defined by finding the path through its constant fluid motion, evasion, flight.
And if we look at Aang through the lens of a polyvagal trauma response.
Yeah, pause right there. Break down polyvagal for me because it sounds like a dense medical term. How does that apply to a kid with magic power?
Fair enough. The vagus nerve is a major component of the autonomic nervous system in humans.
Okay.
It regulates our subconscious stress response. Yeah. Basically our fight, flight, or freeze mechanism.
The stuff we do without thinking.
Exact. For Aang, as a survivor of a genocide who was raised in a culture of evasion, his autonomic nervous system is biologically hardwired for the flight response. When faced with stress, his vagus nerve instantly signals his body to evade, to flutter away, to avoid direct impact.
So his literal biology is telling him...
Yes.
Yeah.
But earthbending demands the exact opposite somatic response.
Because it's a completely different element.
Earth requires you to stand your ground, to root your physical stance into the dirt, and to absorb kinetic force head on.
You cannot manipulate a mountain if you are constantly fluttering above it.
Precisely. So Aang's physical inability to earthbend in these scenes isn't just a lack of skill or that he hasn't memorized the right martial arts form.
It's deeper than that.
It is a literal somatic blockage. His nervous system is rejecting the requirement to stay put.
Wow.
He has to become the immovable object mentally before he can manipulate the immovable object physically.
And we see an equally terrifying somatic blockage with Zuko, too.
Oh, the lightning scene.
Yes. Iroh is trying to teach him the highly advanced technique of light direction.
Right.
But Iroh flat out refuses to teach Zuko how to actually generate his own lightning, and the anatomical reasoning behind Iroh's refusal is absolutely wild.
It is, because it requires us to step completely outside of Western anatomical literalism and look at Eastern martial arts philosophy.
Explain that distinction for us.
In Western medicine, the heart is a pump. But Iroh explains that the Cole's incredibly dangerous, precise energy of light must completely bypass the heart.
Why?
Because in these Eastern traditions, the heart isn't just a blood pump. It is viewed as the emperor of emotion.
Emperor of emotion. That's a powerful phrase.
It is the absolute seat of the mind's volatility and passion.
And Zuko is nothing but volatility.
Exactly.
The kid is consumed by internal shame, unbridled anger, and this frantic, desperate need for his father's validation.
Iroh knows that if Zuko allows that cold, destructive electrical energy to interact with the volatile emotional center of his heart, it will cause a catastrophic, fatal short circuit.
It will literally blow him apart from the inside.
Yes, the grounding of that energy absolutely has to happen in the stomach, what is known as the lower dantian.
The lower dantian.
Right, which is the stable, physical core of the body. Zuko's internal trauma and rage, physically, biologically, prevent him from generating lightning safely.
So his psychological block is an undeniable physical reality.
Exactly.
When the show nails this connection between the mind and the magic, it's brilliant. But our fan sources point out massive failures in how this kinetic agency is actually portrayed on screen when it comes to visual effects.
Right, the VFX choice.
Let's talk about Toph. She's kidnapped, trapped in a solid metal cage. And the fans universally praise the sequence because she doesn't deliver a monologue about her.
Right, she doesn't talk about it.
She literally invents metal bending on the spot to violently reclaim her age.
It's a triumph because it actively trusts the audience. The breakthrough is purely kinetic. It's visual storytelling that validates her agency without a single line of exposition. We understand her power simply by watching her use it to tear the box apart.
But then, right alongside that triumph, we have this catastrophic VFX failure regarding the Earth Kingdom background.
This is a huge sticking point in the critiques.
The critics aggressively pointed out that the digital environments behind the characters frequently looked excessively blurry and focused.
One reviewer called it a smudged JPEG.
A smudged JPEG. Now, normally I would say fans complaining about a blurry green screen are just being overly... is it really that big of a deal?
It is a massive deal.
Really?
Because a blurry background here isn't just a complaint about cheap aesthetics. It is a fundamental narrative disaster.
Okay, how so?
Think back to Bumi's lecture on neutral Jing.
Right. Waiting and listening.
Toph's entire philosophy, her entire way of interacting with the world, relies on a tactile, intimate connection to her environment through her seismic sense.
Because she's blind, so she sees...
Exactly. She feels the dirt, the moss, the ants marching, the micro vibrations of the bedrock.
Oh, wow. So if the Earth she's supposed to be intimately connected to looks like an artificial out-of-focus projector...
The core philosophy of the magic shatters for the viewer.
That makes total sense.
You cannot sell an audience on the profound physical connection a character has to the ground they stand on if the ground itself looks completely disconnected from the actor.
It just looks fake.
Right. The visual effects department, by blurring the background to save rendering time or hide the green screen seams, is accidentally sabotaging the writer's room's deep exploration of neutral Jing.
That is fascinating. The medium itself is fighting the message.
It really is.
And that leads to a much larger complaint from the critics, the introduction of unearned magic.
Unearned magic. This is where things get really messy.
There's a sequence where Aang and Katara encounter a massive steam-spewing serpent. And Aang, who in this adaptation has spent virtually zero on-screen time practicing or learning waterbend, suddenly executes a flawless, highly advanced magical healing technique on the beast to calm it down.
The reviewers in our sources were staring at their screens in absolute disbelief.
I bet.
Because in the established lore of this unit, mastery of the elements is a grueling, lifelong martial discipline.
It's not easy.
And healing is an even more specialized, incredibly complex facet of waterbend. It involves manipulating the invisible chi pathways within a living, biological organism.
You have to know what you're doing.
It requires an intimate understanding of anatomy.
Right. It's not a superpower you just unlock in a moment of stress because you believe in your heart.
Exactly.
Having Aang instantly heal a giant monster turns a rigorous martial discipline into a convenient, consequence-free plot device.
It completely devalues the magic.
Yeah.
Handing Aang unearned magical abilities is a symptom of a much larger script.
What disease is that?
The adaptation frequently bypasses the journey of discovery entirely. They want the cool visual moment without the narrative legwork.
Which ultimately tears the foundational lore of the world to shreds.
Completely to shreds.
So how do these characters actually learn things in this version of the story? If they aren't practicing, how are they acquiring knowledge?
Well, that's the thing. They aren't.
Because it seems like the writers are remixing the established lore just for the sake of modern pace. Let's look at what I'm calling the off-screen prop.
The epistemological failures in this script are glaring.
Okay, epistemologic, meaning how we know what we know, right? The study of knowledge acquisition.
Exactly. How do the characters acquire the information they need to drive the plot forward?
Right.
In the script, we have Aang, who has been frozen solid in an iceberg for 100 years, completely cut off from the world.
Literally on ice.
Right. He's standing at a random flower stand, looks up at a red dot in the sky, and casually explains the exact meteorological mechanics and the specific military history of Sozin's comet.
The very comet that the Fire Nation used to wipe out his entire civilization.
Yes.
A comet he was frozen in ice for. How does he know the name of it? Who told him the military strategy? Did he read a pamphlet off screen?
It makes no sense within the narrative, but this is entirely driven by the streaming era anxiety we touched on earlier.
Okay, unpack that.
Showrunners working today have this deep-seated fear that modern viewers, holding their smartphones on the couch, will click away if a mystery takes too much time to solve.
They are terrified of losing the audience.
So they remove the friction of research, they strip out the infiltration of ancient, guarded libraries, or the terrifying, ambiguous spirit visions that would naturally reveal this lore over several episodes.
They just hand him the answer off screen to move the plot forward.
Yes.
They treat lore like an unread notification they just want to swipe away.
It's an administrative approach to storytelling, and in doing so, they strip the audience of earned catharsis.
That psychological joy of putting the puzzle pieces together alongside the hero.
Exact. When the hero just already knows the answer, the audience becomes passive observers rather than active participants in the mystery.
And the fans, who I affectionately refer to in my notes as the continuity auditors, absolutely lose their minds over this stuff.
Oh, they do?
They spotted another massive timeline break with the casual name-dropping of the Painted Lady.
Right.
An Earth Kingdom refugee in Season 2 casually mentions praying to the Painted Lady as a patron saint of a flower shop.
Now, to a casual viewer who is maybe watching this while folding laundry, that is just background flavor text.
It sounds like a cool fantasy name.
But to a dedicated fan, it is a glaring continuity error that breaks the reality of the world.
Because the Painted Lady is a highly specific, localized spirit.
Yes, she is tied to a polluted river village deep within the Fire Nation, a storyline that doesn't occur until much later.
So we have to discuss the dual philosophies behind a writing. Is dropping her name early a generous act of fan service? Like, are the writers just winking at the audience to say, hey, we know the deep cuts of the lore, we see you? Or is it narrative cannibal?
Based on the critique, it leans heavily toward narrative cannibal.
Wow. Okay. Why?
When you rip a piece of profound mythology out of its proper geographic and emotional context, just to drop a recognizable noun into the script for the fans to point at, you turn profound thematic elements into cheap background dressing.
It's just a prop.
It violates the principle of a cohesive, lived-in world. It reminds the viewer they are watching a constructed television show engineered to trigger nostalgia rather than observing a real universe.
But the writers don't just mess with the timeline. They actively break the spiritual architecture of the universe itself.
This was a massive point of contention.
Let's look at the spirit scar, Aang. The group finds this geographical location where the veil between the human world and the spirit world thin. And instead of adhering to the established rule, the adaptation allows the entire ensemble cast Aang, Katara, and Sokka to just sit down in a circle, meditate, and cross their spirits into the other realm together.
And the critics were furious.
Boiling over.
The foundational rule of this universe is that only the Avatar has the innate, exclusive spiritual ability to cross that barrier.
Listening to you explain why this offended the fans so much, my mind immediately goes to IT infrastructure.
IT infrastructure.
Yeah.
I am very curious where you're going with this.
Which sounds incredibly nerdy, but hear me out.
Listen.
Think of the spirit world as an incredibly secure, top-secret corporate server.
Okay.
The Avatar is the absolute only person on the entire planet who holds the IT admin decryption.
Right. They have root access.
Exact. That exclusivity defines their incredible value to the world, but it also defines their immense, isolating burden.
Because they are the only one.
They have to carry the weight of that access alone. No one else can see what they... But this adaptation basically rewrites the code so that anyone who happens to be sitting near the server rack can just log in as a guest and browse the file.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. It completely flattens the magic system.
Right.
By allowing the ensemble cast to tag along on a spiritual journey, you turn a sacred, profoundly isolating mystical burden into a fun group field trip.
It's like a weekend getaway.
It democratizes the magic in a way that fundamentally devalues the Avatar's unique, godlike role purely to give the supporting actors something to do in the episode.
And the spiritual rule-breaking inside the spirit world gets even worse.
Oh, it really does.
Toph, who is wandering around this vast spirit library, suddenly bumps into past Avatar, just a physical face-to-face meet and greet in the aisles of the library.
The translated Hebrew reviews were apocalyptic over this specific scene. They pointed out that the show is built on a fundamental Eastern philosophy of reincarnation. Past avatars are literally past lives of the current avatar.
They aren't different people.
Exactly. They share the exact same soul, just reborn into a new physical vessel.
So Toph having a casual chat with Kyoshi while Aang is also walking around somewhere else is structurally impossible.
It shatters the internal logic entirely. It turns a profoundly personal spiritual communion, the idea of looking inward to commune with your own past life, into a historical meet and greet in a magical haunted house.
Like a theme park attraction.
It treats Kyoshi like a ghost haunting a hallway rather than an internalized spiritual essence.
If the writers are willing to rewrite the fundamental spiritual laws verse just for a makes sense, right, established psychological...
And that is exactly what we see.
Which brings us to the mechanics of manipulation, gaslighting, and absolute power. We are looking at a clash between different forms of systemic control and how this adaptation dramatically alters the psychological profiles of the story's major villains.
This is a really vital part of the analysis.
Let's start at the very top of the food, Fire Lord Ozai.
The treatment of Ozai in this script is fascinating because it completely misunderstands what made him terrifying in the original text.
Right. There is a scene where Ozai has just humiliated his daughter, Princess Azula, by giving away a military command she desperately...
Yes.
And immediately afterward, he looks at her, softens his tone, and asks her to speak freely about her feelings regarding...
It's jarring. When I read that, I was stunned. Is it really that bad that he asked her how she felt?
It is catastrophic character writing. It is the softening of fascism.
The softening of fascism.
Wow. In the original text, Ozai is a monolith of narcissistic cruelty. He is an apocalyptic fascist dictator who views his children purely as military assets.
They are tools for his imperial expansion. Right. He fundamentally does not care about their internal emotional state. A tool does not have feeling.
But by having him sit down and ask Azula to process her emotion bond, the script is attempting to create a relatable HBO-style family drama.
Everyone needs a sympathetic angle now.
Right, but it drastically dilutes Ozai's apocalyptic dread. He goes from being terrifying, unfeeling force, just being a mildly manipulative mid-level manager dealing with a frustrating...
What's equally fast is how the script alters Azula's linguistic choice to reinforce this new transactional dynamic.
Your critics were all over this.
They keenly pointed out that Azula repeatedly calls Ozai my Fire Lord instead of calling him father.
Yes, she eradicates all familial warmth and favor.
She does.
She is no longer a broken daughter's toxic father's love. She is a soldier seeking a command.
But while her relationship with her father is cold and professional, her relationship with her peers is terrifyingly unhinged.
Which brings us to Azula's weaponized dominance.
The count.
Oh, the countdown scene. This was deeply unsettling to read.
It really was.
She is sitting in a room with her two closest childhood friends, Mai and Ty Lee. Azula casually points out that Mai has a romantic crush on her brothers.
Right.
And then without any warning or provocation, Azula commands Ty Lee to kill Mai. Then she commands Mai to kill Ty Lee.
I don't know.
And she literally starts counting down from 10, threatening to incinerate them both into ash if they don't fight to the death right there on the floor.
She counts down to 2 before casually stopping, smiling, and saying she just needed to know they were...
That is just sociopathic behavior. What is the narrative purpose of that?
From a strategic perspective, it is a highly calculated psychological calibration.
Explain that.
Azula is proving that her capacity for sudden, overwhelming violence will always supersede any fragile emotional bond, like a teenage crush or childhood nostalgia.
She wants to be the scariest thing in the room.
Exactly. She views love and empathy as critical structural weaknesses. By threatening lethal violence over something so trivial, she establishes total, inescapable dominance over her team before they embark on a crucial mission.
She is forcing them to operate out of pure terror rather than loyalty.
And she expands on this terrifying worldview later with a parable of the 2 dragons.
The 2 dragons?
She tells this elaborate bedtime story about 2 dragons born from the same egg. Higashi, who is massive and powerful, and Yoshu, who is weak and frail.
Okay.
Yoshu does all the grueling hunting, and Higashi just effortlessly swoops in and steals his food every time. One day, Higashi falls fast asleep, completely vulnerable.
So the little guy finally has a...
Yes, Yoshu has the chance to finally kill his tormentor, but he hesitates for a single second. Higashi wakes up and instantly slaughters Yoshu.
Wow. And Azula's thesis from this parable is that mercy is a fatal biological flaw.
True power is unearned dominance.
The smaller dragon's only regret was not killing his brother in his sleep when he had the chance. She explicitly states that hesitation equals death, and she makes it clear she plans to apply this ruthless lesson to her own brother.
It's a great theme on paper. It really outlines her philosophy.
But the fans found this monologue incredibly boring.
Oh, they tore it apart.
The reviews were brutal, calling it dry and painfully long. Why did a great thematic parable fail so hard on TV?
It fails because it violates television's economy of tension.
The economy?
In literature, a parable is beautiful. The reader controls the pace, they can linger on the metaphor. But in an audio-visual medium, stopping a high-stakes political thriller to have a character sit statically in a chair and deliver a 3-minute bedtime story about imaginary reptiles completely stalls the narrative engine.
You just want them to get on with it.
Right. The thematic resonance is entirely lost because the audience is checking their watches, waiting for the plot to resume.
Okay, let's contrast Azula's overt, violent dominance with the quiet, insidious control of
Long Feng, a very different kind of villain.
Long Feng utilizes what I can only describe as weaponized comfort.
Weaponized comfort. That's good.
When Aang finally confronts him about the hidden reality of the war, that the city is corrupt and ignoring a global conflict, Long Feng literally leans in, smiles, and tells Aang to trust your heart and to ignore the invisible vibrations of reality.
He is actively telling the Avatar, the world's spiritual leader, that his naive, surface-level perception is his greatest strength.
He is purposefully blinding Aang to the city's corruption by wrapping the deception in a complex.
It is a masterclass in manipulation.
It is the ultimate toxic corporate manager move.
Right.
I've seen this exact behavior in off. Imagine you work at a failing company. You see the spreadsheets, vendors are calling about late payments. You feel the structural vibrations that the company is collapsing.
You see the writing on the wall.
Yes. You take it to your manager, and instead of addressing the financials, the manager deflects and says, you know what your problem is. You aren't being. Just trust the process and keep bringing that positive energy. We value your spirit.
That analogy is spot on. The manager actively keeps you blind to preserve their own power, framing their manipulation as praise for your positivity. Longfeng provides a comforting lie because acknowledging the ugly truth would require difficult systemic act.
Which is exactly what he does to King Kui. Kui is the ruler of the city. Aang bursts into the throne room screaming about a global war, falling cities, and mass casualties.
And Kui completely ignores him.
Completely turns away to ask about the silver amaranth flowers blooming in.
King Kui's willful ignorance is a brilliant structural metaphor for a leader actively choosing aesthetics over ugly reality.
The garden is controlled, manicured, and
The war is messy, chaotic, and brutal. He chooses the garden.
And Longfeng facilitates that ignorance flawless. He uses half-truths to build a narrative. He points out that Katara stole nettles for a sick child, or that Sokka was near a previous assassination. Paint the heroes as spies.
He provides Kui with the exact bureaucratic paperwork necessary to excuse his own cowardice.
But gaslighting only works on those who are afraid of.
Yes.
What happens when these characters are violently forced to confront the ugliest truths of their own trauma, when the comforting lies are stripped away?
That plunges us into the fractures of trauma. We're looking at how this narrative explores the physical and emotional manifestation.
And how the adaptation drastically changes the fates of its traumatized character.
Exactly. Let's look at the absolute unraveling of Team Avatar, which begins with the devastating theft of Aang's flying bison, Appa.
We have to remember that Appa isn't just a pet. He is Aang's spiritual tether distinct to culture.
He is the last living remnant of Aang's.
And when Aang discovers Appa is gone, he completely snaps. He gets tunnel vision, and he turns his profound grief outward, vicious, cruel.
Specifically toward Toph.
Right. Toph had just sacrificed everything, literally using her earthbending to hold up a massive, sinking ancient library so the rest of the team could escape.
Because she was holding up an entire building. She couldn't stop the thieves from taking Appa.
And Aang looks at her and says, directly to her face, I don't need you anymore.
It is a devastating surgical strike at her deepest insecurity.
Her fear of being a burden.
Yes. Aang isolates himself as a toxic defense mechanism.
Now, I have to ask, doesn't trauma make people ugly and unfair in real life? I know I've lashed out at the people closest to me when I'm hurting.
Oh, sure. Everyone has.
Isn't this just a highly realistic depiction of acute psychological grief? Why did the fans hate this scene so much?
You are entirely correct from a psychological standpoint. Trauma is rarely polite, and lashing out at the people who are safest, the people who won't abandon you, is a very real, very human response.
So why the backlash?
The fans rejected it because it fundamentally misunderstands the screenwriting limits of protagonist sympathy.
The limits of sympathy, what does that mean in this context?
Television is a constructed reality. It requires the audience to root for the protagonist.
Okay.
If a hero's cruelty feels vastly disproportionate, especially toward a beloved character who just performed a massive, agonizing, heroic sacrifice, the audience's loyalty severs.
They just stopped liking him.
The fans felt that the specific dialogue, I don't need you anymore, crossed a line from being a sympathetic, flawed reaction into active, unredeemable cruelty.
The writers prioritized maximum dramatic friction over maintaining the emotional bond between the audience and the hero.
Exactly. They made Aang too mean for TV.
Speaking of trauma and dramatic friction, we have to look at the vastly different paths of Jet Iroh. Let's start with the tragic.
Jet's arc is so tragic.
He is a former child soldier, a radicalized freedom fighter drowning in survivor's guilt. In this live-action adaptation, Jet sacrifices himself to distract a giant owl spirit, Wan Shi Tong, so the kids can escape a crumbling library.
And the fan fury over this specific death was scorching.
Why he died a hero?
Because the adaptation fundamentally misunderstood what genre Jet's character actually belonged to.
Wait, what do you mean by his genre?
In the original animated series, Jet's demise occurs deep within the bowels of the city, at the hands of the corrupt human political apparatus he was so violently trying to expose.
I see.
He is a casualty of human corruption, brainwashed and broken by the state. It is a deeply political, messy death that perfectly fits his overarching theme as a flawed, tragic radical.
But in the adaptation, he is literally eaten by a giant CGI owl.
Exactly. By having him die fighting a mystical bird in a spirit library, the writers turned a poignant political tragedy into generic monster movie survival horror.
They gave him a standard action hero death, but completely robbed him of all meaningful thematic resonance.
His death says nothing about the corruption of...
Contrast that tragic failure with the absolute grace of Iroh's restorative.
This is one of the most powerful arcs in the story.
Iroh is a former Fire Nation supreme commander who lost his only son, Lieutenant, to the violent siege of this very... And in the script, Iroh comes face to face with a White Lotus member who reveals he was a deserter from Iroh's army.
And his cowardly desertion indirectly caused the breakdown in the front lines that led to Lieutenant's death.
The tension in that scene is unbearable. The deserter fully expects Iroh to act like Higashi from Azula's dragon.
To strike him down with the absolute fire of vengeance.
Yes, the grievance is absolute, and by the laws of their world, Iroh is entirely justified in full retribution.
But instead of vengeance, Iroh bows his head and asks the deserter for forgiveness.
It's stunning.
Iroh acknowledges that his own imperialist actions, his own aggressive orders as a commander, created the unbearable trauma that led to the man's desertion in the first place.
He takes responsibility for the cycle of violence, and by asking for forgiveness from the man who helped cause the act breaks that.
It is breathtaking, profound meditation.
It
argues that true strength isn't the divine right to destroy those who have wronged you, but the unimaginable, agonizing courage required to forgive them and dismantle the system that created the trauma.
And that struggle with past sins brings us Zuko's muscle memories.
The cat.
Before Zuko can reach any sort of forgiveness, he is trapped by the rigid architecture of... We see him in a Dust Kingdom operating under a fate. He sees these corrupt Earth Kingdoms extorting a farmer. And he doesn't just punch them.
He subjects them to a forensic visual breakdown. He points out their mismatched pauldrons, their outdated greaves, and quotes verbatim from Army Code 27, Section 4, regarding the illegal commandeering of civilian livestock.
It's like a world-class violinist.
A violinist?
Yeah, imagine a retired virtuoso who played in the best symphonies in the world trying to hide out in a dingy dive. The local band starts playing a song and the guitar is slightly out of tune. That musician is going to physics. They literally cannot unhear the wrong.
That's brilliant.
Zuko cannot unsee military slop. His internal sheet music is the strict Fire Nation military doctrine.
That analogy perfectly captures his tragedy. He isn't necessarily defending the abstract concept of human rights for the farmer.
Right.
He is defending the abstract concept of military honor and operational efficiency. He has lost his home, his royal title, and his family. The internal architecture of how a proper soldier should behave is the only structural support keeping his mind from collapsing entirely.
But later, down in the Crystal Catacombs, locked in a dark cell with his bitter enemy Katara, Zuko finally lets that structural support collapse.
He shares a moment of profound vulnerability.
He explains the physical reality of his signature burn scar, which was inflicted by his abusive father.
And Zuko uses a brilliant metaphor here.
Yes, he explains that for a firebender to be permanently scarred by fire, they have to completely drop their most instinctual defense. It's like a waterbender willingly drown.
He intentionally extinguishes his defensive pilot.
He admits that some part of him, some broken of his child, believed he actually deserved his father's. He takes off his armor in a den of wolves, allowing Katara's empathy to reach the... It is an absolute trauma-bonding mess.
It highlights how victims of generational trauma often internalize the violence of their abusers just to make sense of a cruel, chaotic world.
But here's where I have to just laugh in absolute disbelief at the fan critiques.
Are the critiques on this scene?
In the middle of this breathtaking, heartbreaking emotional sequence, some of the continuity auditors and artists completely ignored the trauma bonding.
Yep.
Instead, they loudly, aggressively complained about Katara's...
It's so frustrating.
They demanded to know exactly when and where Katara managed to change out of her intricate painted lady disguise and back into her normal Water Tribe tunic inside a lock.
It reveals a fascinating yet deeply frustrating byproduct of modern fandom culture.
What's that?
Audiences have been trained by Easter egg culture to treat serialized television like a rigid puzzle box, scouring every single frame for logistical consistency.
But treating a show like a mechanical puzzle box ruins emotional immersion.
Entirely.
The writers obviously needed Katara in her standard visual identity, her blue tunic, so the audience would subconsciously connect with her essential nature during this vulnerable exchange with Zuko.
The continuity error is the toll paid for maximum emotional resonance.
Exactly. When viewers allow a minor wardrobe inconsistency to entirely shatter their immersion in a profound scene about overcoming childhood, they are fundamentally ignoring the actual purpose.
They are prioritizing logistics over humanity.
Which begs the question, why are fans looking at wardrobe instead of trauma?
Because treating the show like a puzzle box is exactly what happens when the physical, real-world constraints of television production begin to break the illusion for the viewer.
If the medium is already breaking, the viewer looks for the cracks.
Exactly. We have to address the biological and technical limitations of live-action adaptation.
Let's start with the biological clock.
In animation, characters are immortal. They do not age, unless the illustrator explicitly decides they do.
But in live action, the production is in a constant losing race against the biology of their child actor.
A young is supposed to be a naive 12-year-old kid who just woke up from an iceberg.
Right.
But because a VFX-heavy television season takes a minimum of 2 years to write, shoot, and render, by the time they film season 2, the child actor has hit puberty.
He's grown a foot taller, his shoulders have broadened, and his voice has dropped a full octave.
It creates immense cognitive dissonance for the audience. The physical reality of the actor is actively fighting the required illusion of the immortal animated character.
You are constantly reminded of the past.
And the physical constraints don't stop with puberty. They extend into the digital world.
Let's talk about the green screen eyeline mismatch at exactly minute 40 of that episode with the steam serpent.
The critics meticulously noted that during the climax of the action sequence, Katara is supposed to be staring down this terrifying 50-foot CGI beast.
Right.
But her eyeline is clearly focused about 3 feet above the monster's head.
To a casual viewer, that might sound like a ridiculous, annoying nitpick. Why does our brain sound the alarm bells over a slightly elevated eye? Why does it bother us?
It comes down to deep evolutionary biology.
Really? Biology?
Yes. Human beings possess highly specialized neural hardware dedicated to tracking the gaze of others.
Like looking where someone else is.
Right. We are hypersensitive to eye contact. It's how our ancestors survived predators and formed complex social bonds.
Okay, that makes...
When we see an actor whose eyes are focused above the object they are supposedly interacting with, it instantly triggers the uncanny valley. The brain instinctively flags the image as false.
It reminds the viewer that they are not watching a magical battle.
No, they are watching a teenager stare at a tennis ball on a stick on a soundstage in Vancouver.
It shatters the million-dollar illusion instantly.
It does.
And that cinematic disconnect bleeds into the writing mechanics as well, specifically with the reliance on the deus ex machina.
We see this clearly at the end of a heavily criticized episode where Aang is trapped in a dark psychological state regarding his missing bison.
To resolve his emotional crisis, the writers have him deliver a confusing philosophical word salad.
I had to feel everything so that I could feel nothing. The key everything.
It means absolutely nothing. It's pseudo-spiritual gibberish.
It really is.
And then, to cap it off, he is suddenly awoken from his stupor by the loud sound of Appa roaring. But Appa is still missing. The bison isn't there.
It is an auditory deus ex machina. Instead of doing the difficult scene-by-scene narrative legwork to have Aang reach an emotional resolution naturally through action or dialogue, the writers simply pushed the Appa roar button on the soundboard.
It is a cheap shortcut replacing earned character development. They used a sound effect to skip a character arc.
And we see that same unearned rushing with Azula. She uses her highly anticipated, terrifying lightning bending early in the season against random, nameless Earth Kingdom soldiers.
Which completely ruins the tension of Chekhov's gun.
Exactly. In cinematic storytelling, a devastating weapon must be paced to maximize the biological fear.
By showing her use the lightning in broad daylight against minor lack, they dilute its impact for her eventual high-stakes climax with Aang.
And speaking of Aang's climax, the critics were furious about Aang's reaction to learning that Toph lost Appa. They called his reaction stoic. They said he had a poker face.
Why is that a problem?
In the narrative architecture, this specific loss is supposed to trigger the Avatar seat, an apocalyptic, world-altering manifestation of pure, uncontrolled emotion.
Glowing eyes, the floating...
Right. But because the live-action actor was likely directed to underplay the reaction for prestige TV subtlety, the physical restraint breaks the magical logic.
If the audience doesn't see world-ending grief on the actor's face, they cannot logically justify the world-ending mad follow.
All of these critique, the mismatched eye lines, the puberty, the rushed pacing, the auditory deus ex machina, they all lead to the overarching metacritique.
The self-fulfilling prophecy of fandom.
Yes.
We have to talk about the highly publicized real-world fact that the original animated creators of Avatar famously walked away from this live-action show early in production due to creative differences.
This is the ghost haunting the entire production, and it introduces a powerful psychological theory that colors every single review we read.
Confirmation bias?
Confirmation bias.
Yeah.
When a dedicated fan base knows that the original architects abandoned the project, the inherent trust between storyteller and audience is broken before frame one ever airs.
It's exactly like going to your absolute favorite restaurant. You've been looking forward to it all week. But right before you sit down at the table, someone tells you that the visionary head chef just quit in a screaming rage, and corporate management is now cooking the food in the back.
That changes the whole.
Even if the meal they bring you is objectively fine, maybe even good, you are going to meticulously inspect every single grain of salt on the plate to prove that it lacks soul. You are looking for reasons to reject it.
Because the baseline of trust is gone. Every clunky line of exposition, every mismatched eye line, and every lore deviation is no longer processed as a standard TV production error, which happens on every show.
It is immediately weaponized as irrefutable proof that the new showrunners fundamentally misunderstood and maliciously destroyed the soul of the story.
The fans aren't just watching a show. They are prosecuting a case.
Which brings us to the grand synthesis of everything we've unpacked today. We have experienced incredible whiplash on this deep dive.
We really have.
We've gone from the soaring, brilliant, heavy themes of Iroh's restorative justice and Zuko's profound vulnerability in the catacomb, all the way down to the collapsing foundation of dry, expositional monologue, lore-breaking timeline shifts, and the unavoidable biological constraints of the cinematic.
It is the tragedy of brilliant concepts trapped inside flawed structural execution. But I would argue it serves a highly necessary cultural function.
The diagnostic value of broken.
Yes. Perfectly safe, adequate adaptation is often consumed and immediately forgotten.
Right.
But a deeply flawed, controversial adaptation forces a fandom to furiously articulate exactly why the original was a structural masterpiece. It forces us to define our terms.
It teaches us.
It really does.
Yeah.
It teaches us the economy of tension, the true value of kinetic storytelling over static exposition, and the delicate balance of subverting expectations without breaking internal logic. We understand the magic system better because we saw it break.
And that leads me to a final provocative thought for you, our list, to mull over on your own. We spent a lot of time today discussing Wan Shitong's spirit library.
A vast, ethereal place where knowledge is immaculately preserved on a shelf, but explicitly forbidden from ever interacting with the messy, unpredictable reality of the human world.
A pristine collection untouched by human hands, frozen in amber.
Yes.
But if knowledge is locked away, perfectly pristine but entirely unused, is it truly knowledge or is it just a tomb?
That's a great question.
Now, I want you to apply that exact logic to the art of adaptations. If a studio perfectly translates the literal mechanical plot points of a beloved story, a meeting in a lower ring, a trip to a buried library, the kidnapping of a bison, but they completely change the underlying emotional themes, the specific somatic mechanics of the magic, and the very soul of the character just to fit a modern...
Have they actually preserved the story for a new generation?
Or did they just build a very expensive live action?
This raises an important question about what we truly value in the stories we hold dear. Is it merely the sequence of events, or is it the resonance of the
It really does make you rethink the entire landscape of media we consume every day. I encourage you to interrogate your own internal canon. Keep questioning the architecture of the fortresses of media you find yourself. Look past the jagged white line on the X-ray and really examine the murky waters. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you on the next